If you've been arrested for drunk driving, the first call you need to make is to attorney Ted Morgan. You can't afford to go it alone. You need to know your rights. You need someone with the experience to put your DUI behind you. 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Call 706-317-5733. Ask for Ted.
Call Ted Morgan Law when you need a lifeline.
Hey everybody, welcome back to an all-new episode of DUI Law, Real Talk with Ted Morgan. I'm your host, Mike Leon. You know, Ted's a seasoned Georgia trial attorney who has spent the last 30 years defending drivers in DUI and criminal cases in the state of Georgia. And in today's episode, we're talking about one of the most important distinctions in DUI law, and that's the difference between first-time and repeat DUI charges. So, Ted, I would love to know why this matters first and foremost, but before we dive into the legal details, can you share a little bit about your background and how you got into DUI defense work?
Absolutely. And Mike, thank you for having me. This is a real privilege here to talk to these folks. So my background is maybe a little unusual for some. I spent about 5 years as a CPA, which has nothing to do with DUI, but then I went back to law school. And so the first part of my career, and I still do it a little, it was civil litigation, not criminal. But I went to a DUI seminar to get some CLEs that I needed to continue my licensing. And the next thing I knew, I was just kind of falling in love with DUI law. And a lot of it seemed very natural. And so I kept doing that, and it's just grown to where now it's a huge part of my practice. Been practicing since 93, and I would say at least 20 or more years of that have been with the DUI practice.
Man, 30 years of experience. How has that experience really shaped the way you've handled DUI cases in today's age?
I have to say, you learn how to win. Law school is great. You learn a lot there, and you come out kind of green. But the biggest thing that I think I offer folks and any experienced DUI attorney is that you learn how to win. When you're in law school, I remember a professor telling me once, law school is like a golf course. You're playing the field, and then when you get out, you're playing tennis because you're battling an opponent or you're in a boxing match. And so you've got to learn the system, and you've got to have relationships and know how to win.
Very good analogies and applicable as somebody who's in golf and boxing myself. So
yeah, no offense to the golfing and the tennis players. I'm a tennis player myself and golfer. So yeah.
So Ted, so let me ask you then. So for the first time, for the listeners out there, maybe this is their first time facing a DUI charge in the state of Georgia. Given all your experience, what is something that they should expect to face when they get this charge?
Well, when you're going to have shock and awe. For one thing, if you've never been arrested and maybe never arrested for DUI either, it is a very humbling and can be a very fearful time. So you got to reach out to somebody who knows a good attorney, or maybe you know one, because they can help. I think one of the big mistakes that people make is thinking that, hey, I got arrested, I'm cooked, I'm done. And that's just not the case most of the time.
How is for second and third DUI, how is that different in terms of penalties and how the court handles the cases with respect to those?
I think in the simplest terms, you're a target now. When a prosecutor sees that you've done this before, and let's just say within the last 5 years, you're a target now in that office because they have a problem. They've got to prosecute you, and maybe a little more vigorously than they would have on a first DUI. It's not true for all jurisdictions. Your first DUI can be very painful, particularly if you don't have good representation. But I think that's the biggest thing, is that you're facing more penalties, more license suspension, and you got a target on your back, unfortunately, because I've always said the prosecutors, they have two baskets. One basket is the case of first-time offenders. the other basket is everybody else.
You know, Ted, you just kind of fed into my follow-up about license suspension, because obviously that's the first thing associated, I think people think of when they get a DUI. I'm not going to have my license. Can you kind of give our audience here the differences in how a license suspension works for if you have repeat offenses versus if it is your first time?
So in Georgia, Mike, you have an administrative license suspension procedure that can come into play on the night of arrest. But regardless, if you have DUIs and multiple DUIs, the license suspension process, and this is pretty much true with any state, I believe, but in Georgia, the Department of Driver Services that licenses you, they have their own laws and rules that govern your suspension. So you're going to be facing some serious suspension consequences if it's your second or third. But your first one can be bad, and if you don't take the proper steps early on in the process, on the night of arrest in Georgia, you might only have 30 days to save your license, depending on what you did when the officer asked you to submit to a particular test that we'll probably talk about later. But so it can be severe, whether it's first, second, or third, but naturally it gets worse.
So I've heard this phrase about this look-back system. Can you kind of explain how Georgia's look-back system works? Is it like a 5-year, 10-year look-back? Just explain what the system is and how Georgia's works.
Yeah, in its simplest terms, on the criminal side, like I say, you might have 2 cases the night you're arrested. The criminal case being one, and that's a 10-year look-back in Georgia right now. By comparison, I believe Alabama has switched to a 5-year look-back. So they're looking back from the date of arrest 10 years, and if you have been convicted for a DUI for a date of arrest within 10 years of your current one, then that ramps up the penalty. Georgia has a 2nd and 10, 3rd and 10, and then a 4th and 10. If convicted, is a felony. By definition, that's a felony. So on the licensing side, though, your look back in Georgia is 5 years, which is naturally better for you because they're not looking back as far to decide what to do with your license. And so if you get into first and 5, just what it sounds like, that's your first one in the last 5 years measured from date of arrest. If you get into your 2nd and 5 in Georgia, now you're talking about a longer period of suspension, and actually a period where you don't have any limited driving permit at all. So as we say, you're sitting on the bench. But you do have some opportunities in Georgia to avoid the technical 3-year suspension. You go into ignition interlock permit, and then you have opportunities to reinstate early. But at any first, second, or third, Georgia's rules change a little bit about how long you're suspended and whether and when you get an opportunity to reinstate all of your privileges.
Ted, we've talked a little bit about like first-time DUI cases. In your experience, what are some common mistakes that first-time DUI defendants make that could potentially hurt their case later on?
Yeah, talk too much. It is a natural, I think, somewhat natural human nature, human reaction. I've seen it over and over and over. The conversation starts, I didn't do anything, which again is human nature. And then by the time you're arrested, you realize that this is really happening, and your heart starts racing and your mouth starts moving, and it goes downhill from there because you start saying things to contradict possibly what you've already told this officer. Typically it's, have you had anything to drink tonight? And your answer was no or one. And then by the time he's getting the handcuffs out, you've now decided, now I've really got to do something to get out of this. And I've seen folks start talking, hey, well, look, yeah, maybe I had 2 or 3 drinks, but I'm fine. I can make it home if you'll just let me go home, And so you have just given the prosecutor a little better answer. And even I've seen this too, when folks get arrested, they get in the back of the patrol car, and the arresting officer may be out on the street still doing something with your car, waiting on the tow truck, talking to another officer, and you're in the back of the car. And sometimes you can manage to make a phone call to somebody if your cell phone is still within reach. And they make a phone call, and then they tell whoever they called, yeah, man, I'm drunk as a skunk, and I just got arrested for DUI. Can you come bail me out? Well, you're still on the camera in most any jurisdiction. So talking too much is I see it all the time.
Ted, well, talking too much. Speaking of talking too much, let me ask you, for first-time offenders, does the state of Georgia, let's say you were to get a past DUI, but you lived out of state, does Georgia count those convictions as priors?
So technically the answer is yes. Most any state law that I've reviewed, and I certainly haven't reviewed all 50 states. I'm licensed in Georgia and Alabama, Mike, and they kind of do the same thing, is that we sentence you based on prior DUIs in our state or convictions under another state's law that is substantially similar, or whatever verbiage they use, that catches your DUIs that you got. Say a Georgia driver got a DUI in Texas and he's still a Georgia driver, then he gets a DUI in Georgia. The prosecutor has the ability there to say, hey, this might be your first in Georgia, but it's your second in the last 10 years. Again, 10-year look back. So it can become an issue. Now, I have had cases, and this is certainly not any promises to our viewers, but sometimes when you resolve a DUI case, you might be so fortunate as to convince the prosecutor that, hey, what if we sentence this one as a first in 10, even though we know it is number 2. Sometimes that happens. It's a facts and circumstances thing, and it's a prosecutor's discretion. The other thing, Mike, that I would say is that while states certainly count the out-of-state convictions, sometimes they miss them. And it's not my duty as the defense lawyer to tell them, but sometimes they just miss them.
That's interesting. Didn't know that. All right. So Ted, somebody's watching this, they're listening to this. They're very terrified of what this charge may mean for their future, whether it's their first or second offense. What's a piece of advice that you would give to them?
Well, it's going to sound self-serving, but it's true. I would say hire an attorney. Why don't I say, don't Google your legal defense, because Google is great. ChatGPT is great. You can definitely read some really nice stuff. But if you think you're going to be able to navigate your court system, your judges, your prosecutors, who the only way they know you is a piece of paper. You're just a piece of paper to them, in a sense, and they've got tons of cases. My best advice is settle down and find a good DUI lawyer, because it will make a difference.
Well, Ted, thank you so much for the insights and analysis on this. We truly appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Mike. This has been fun. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, and thank you to everybody out there for listening to DUI Law Real Talk. If you or someone you know is facing a DUI right now in the state of Georgia, or you're worried about a past conviction, coming back, visit tedmorganlaw.com right now to schedule a consultation with Ted. Don't forget to leave us a review and comment, subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I'm Mike Leon. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.